welcome to another Unity 5 tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to fly a dragon or create the controller for a dragon. So I've got this little guy here that I grabbed from the asset store, and he was in the legacy animation system, and he has a whole heap of animations that come with him. If you look at my other two tutorials that I did before this, I showed you how to create a Mecanim animation from an FBX or an old legacy thing, and I used this dragon, and in those tutorials I actually created the fly and the cruise animations that I'll be using in this. So if you want to follow along, you might want to have a look at those before you look at this. Otherwise, if you've got your own dragon and the animations for it, then this will be a similar process for you. Okay, so I've dropped him into the scene. The first thing we need to do is to get him to move around. Okay, so I'm creating a drive script. I don't know why I call it drive, I just do. Anyway, create a file called drive.cs, and if we open that up, it'll have pretty much nothing in it. I've already cleaned out my other functions from this, the update and the start. Now, every time I need to move a character around, what I do is I go to the Unity manual and I grab hold of the script that's in there, and the script you can find if you type into the search get axis, and it comes up. Now I'll just show you that. Where is it? Because I need to cut and paste it too. So this is the import.getAxis reference in the Unity scripting guide, and the first bit of little code that you get that's in C# is this example class, but it's actually a drive function that's going to drive your character around, pushes it forward, and also allows you to turn that character. Okay, so I'm going to copy the insides of this function out of here, and then I'm going to go back into my drive and put them in here. So it's the exact same code. Now you'll see that it allows you to modify in the inspector the speed at which the character is moving forward and the rotation speed. That's how it turns, how quickly it turns. And if you have a look down through this update function, let me just go down to here, you can see that there's a translate function that's going to push the character along its z-axis by translation, and translation is worked out using the get axis vertical value, and the rotation gets axis horizontal. And that's used on the rotation function here. Now, I've used this before in other tutorials, but I haven't actually explained what this get axis is. So if you're not familiar with it, I'll just show you. So I'm going to save this first, and I'll just switch back to Unity. Now, Unity has built-in controllers, I guess, input controllers that you can set inside the project settings. So if you go to Edit, Project Settings, Input, then over in the inspector, you'll see this thing called axes. And if we drop that down, there's a whole bunch of axes in here. So there's one for horizontal, vertical, fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. And these are mappings between what the code is going to do for these axes and which key presses or joysticks or buttons or whatever you want to assign. And you can see there's a mouse X and a mouse Y and a scroll and all those sorts of things in here as well. Now, see this word here, it says horizontal and also says vertical. If you could quickly go back to our code, this is where the vertical and horizontal is. By the way, I've got a cold at the moment, so if I sniff, I'll apologize in advance for it. Okay, so these are the exact same spelling. If we go back to, oh, I've lost it. Edit, project settings, input. These here. Now let's have a look at the horizontal one. So if we open up the horizontal settings, these are all the default. I haven't changed these. These will be the same that you have. The left and the right keyboard buttons work this horizontal axis. Okay, so that's moving like in this direction horizontally. The other alternative buttons are also the A and the D keys, which is pretty usual for an ASDW setup in your game. And you can also set up sensitivity and other things in here. I actually don't ever really touch these. I've never had a need to. And the vertical one, which moves things up and down like this, is the up and down arrow. and the S and W. Actually, I lie, it doesn't move things up and down. It just allows you to grab hold of what these keys are being pressed and then to use them for some particular purpose. So in our code, the vertical axis, which is controlling the up and down arrow keys, also the W and S keys, and if you have a joystick, thumbstick controller, you can also control it with that as well. So it picks up all of these controllers that you set back in that settings, which makes your game quite versatile without a lot of extra coding if you're going to go from one sort of platform to the other. And if you make it into a mobile game, you can add the thumbstick controller, and then with a little bit of tweaking, this will also work for that as well. And so we can see that this vertical axis, which is your up and down arrow keys, is going to control your translation and push the character forward, which is along the Z axis here. And the rotation, which are going to be your left and right arrow keys, is going to rotate the character. All right, so I'll just save that. Let's go back into here. Now, this drive code we want to dump onto our model, which I already have. So you can see that it's here, has a speed of 10 and a rotation speed of 100. So when I run this, this little guy's going to move forward and backwards with the up and down arrow keys, and he's going to turn left and right with the left and right arrow keys. Okay, so I can move him forward and back, and I can rotate him like that. Okay, so that's the default code that I got from Unity and just put it on him. So it's easy for you to control. Now, obviously, a dragon doesn't move around like this, and it's pretty ordinary. This is the same code that I used in the mobile tutorial for driving the cars around as well. Okay, so what do we want next? This little guy is going to be flying, which means that we're going to make him fly when we press, let's say, the space bar. He's going to flap his wings, and that will make him actually translate upwards. And when he's not flapping his wings, we would expect he's going to fall under gravity. All right, so to do that, let's go back into our drive code. And in here, what we're going to do is we're still going to allow our keys to translate and move him around, but every game loop will actually get him to fall down. So let's put transform.translate in here, and we're going to move him downwards, which is his y-axis. And how much we do it? minus 0.1. So it's really quite slight. And we'll need an F on the end of that because it's a float. Okay, so let's save that and come back and run it. Now he should slowly sink. There he goes. Okay. Now, the only way he's going to come back up is if he flaps his wings. So in order for him to flap his wings, we need to animate that. So let's go to an animation controller. Now at this point, I'm just going to split these screens down like this so we can see what's going on, because there's going to be a fair bit of work going on over in this animator state area. All right, so I made in the previous tutorials where I showed you how to convert this model from Legacy into Mecanim, a cruise animation, which I'll put in here. Now, that's going to be the default. When we run that, he's going to have his wings out straight as though he's just cruising through the air. Okay, of course he's still falling, but that's his cruise. And his fly will be this fly forward that I've created. Now, to get him to go from cruise to fly forward, we're going to have to create a trigger. And we're also going to have to code it in so that when the space bar is pressed, that it will cause that trigger to happen. So I'm going to make a transition from cruise to fly forward. So if we right click on that, make transition, and go up to fly forward. And then we need to create a parameter that does that. And I'm going to add in a bool value, and we'll call it is flapping, which will initially be set to false, which means this is off. Now, there are triggers in here that you can cause a transition to trigger, but I've found through a lot of experimentation that the trigger seems to be triggered for more than one update loop. So if you're working within a single update loop for updating stuff, it can cause all sorts of issues to go on with your animation. So I always create a bool, which just works a little bit better. Okay, so initially the flapping is false. On this transition from cruise to fly forward, we're going to add in over here a condition for is flapping. Now, if you want to break the cruise animation and go straight to fly forward, remember that you need to tick off this has exit time, which will interrupt the cruise animation and go straight to fly forward. I think the cruise is actually really short anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. Anyway, so he'll start to flap. So if I just show you this, let's set that as default and run it. Before he falls to the ground, you'll see he starts flapping his wings. There he goes. Okay, great. Now let's go back. We'll just make this the default layer. And we now need to trigger this state here so that it will go into flying. So back in our code, here, we're going to put in a if input.getKey is space, then we're going to grab his animation or his animator and set that is flapping to true. Now, in order to do that, we actually need hold of his animator. So at the top, I need to create an animator or a link to his animator, anim. And then in a start function, we will grab hold of that animator. So anim equals get component animator like that. Okay, so we now have hold of his animator controller in this variable. And down here, after space is pressed and held down, it will be anim.set bool, and the name of the bool, spelling it exactly, is flapping with a capital F. Make sure this is the same as what you've got up here, and that's going to be true. Now, if the space is not down, then we could say else anim.set bool is flapping and set that back to false. So he will stop flapping. Save that, come back to here. We want to go from our fly, we want to transition back to cruise mode. And on that transition, we're going to set when is flapping is false, he will stop flapping. Now, at the same time we're flapping, if I just go back to the code, here we want to push him upwards. So we're going to transform.translate upwards in the Y. So we're saying that he's sort of floating downwards at negative 0.1. When he's flapping, we actually want to sort of overwrite that a little bit and make him go up. So let's say when he flaps, he goes up at 0. And whatever you put in here is going to get this taken off of it after it zips out of here. So we need to take this into consideration. Let's say 3. You can always adjust this later anyway. Like that. And come back into here and let's run it. Right, so when we press the spacebar, you can see that he will flap and he'll go up. Now, when I take my hand off the keyboard and he starts to go down, if he's still in the middle of his flapping animation, it won't stop immediately. And that's because in coming back from fly to cruise, we didn't untick this value here. Right, so now when we go like this, he'll go up. And don't forget, we've still got him moving forward, and he can go up, and he can turn and go forward over here and fly. Okay, so that's not too bad. That's pretty good. Right, now the one problem we have that you might have noticed straight away is he's going to fly off into the distance, and if he's our player character, then that's not very good. So we need the main camera to follow him. So I'm going to grab hold of a script that I've used before, which is a smooth follow. If I can remember where I've put it in here. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I've got this smooth camera follow script, which was a very old script that hung around from I think it was Unity 2, and I've updated it and made it into C#. And I've discussed it in depth in, I think it was a networking example where I added the camera to the car. So I'm just going to show you through the code here, but not go too much in depth. But anyway, this smooth camera is going to be attached to the camera. So drag and drop it onto here. Here it is here. And the smooth camera script has this exposed variable for target, which will allow the camera to follow a certain target. And our target is our dragon. So I'm going to grab him and put him in here because he's the transform that we want to follow. I don't know why my computer is so slow today. There we go. Now, this script also has exposed variables for how far you want the camera behind the character, the height the camera is at, its lag, okay, so how sort of smooth it moves along behind the character, the maximum speed of the camera, so whether it's going to keep up with your character really nicely or whether it's going to fall quite behind, and then when it will snap to the actual character, that distance, and also clamping the head position to make sure that your character stays within the camera's view. So I'm just going to, so you don't have to look for this code elsewhere, is just bring this up and have a look through it. Again, this will be available on the website with my other tutorials. Here's all the exposed variables at the top. Okay, and then basically what this code is doing, if we have a look in the apply, is that it's getting the center position of the target and so the head position of the target to make sure that it keeps within range. You can see that this code has the ability to snap directly to your character if you hit whatever the fire 2 button is set to, which is usually fire 1 by default is your left mouse button and fire 2 would be your right mouse button. You could actually take that out if you don't want to use it. Then you've got, if you're snapping, to apply snapping, which was to make the camera go exactly straight to the character. And then we have, if we're not snapping directly at the character, then we're applying a dampening. And the dampening allows the camera to move along and slowly catch up with your character, which makes it look like it's on a piece of elastic. Okay, then we do all this apply in a late update, and then we've got the apply snapping function. Again, I'm not going to go through it, but you can type this out. You can have a look at the networking camera example if you want more of explanation. Okay, you can adjust the line of sight of the camera, of which way it's looking towards your character. Then we apply the damping function. And then there's also a rotate. Oh, let me bring this out a bit so you can see what's going on here. We set up the rotation for the camera, and then we work out the distance and the offset, and we set the target, which happens in the inspector. Okay, so just going slowly through that code again for you to get a hold of. Right, so that's the smooth camera follow. We take that out of there. Okay, so we've got that attached to the camera and it's going to target our character. So let's run this and let's follow. So you can see that the camera is now smooth following our little dude. Now if we want to go up higher, we can flap. If we want to stop, we will just cruise down. And then we can go off again. As we're cruising forward, we're actually falling down because we're not flapping. Then if we want to go up, we just have to flap again with the space bar. Okay, so this is working okay. It doesn't look all that natural. I mean, when a dragon's flying along, he doesn't turn like that. And also when he's flying along, he doesn't fly with his head up forward. He tends to have his head and whole body rotated in a forward direction in which he's traveling. So what we'll do now is to modify his rotation. Let me just come here. So instead of him being like this, we want to rotate him down so his head's down forward. So he actually looks like he's off and he's moving forward. Now, we could rotate him forward with code, which would be a bit messy. We don't want to get involved in rotating his animation as such, and also his direction that he's moving. So instead of that, we can just rotate him using the Mecanim system. So to rotate this fly forward. Now, with the character selected, if we go into the animation window, you can select the animations that he has on him. So he's only got a cruise and a fly forward at the moment. So we're selecting that. We're going into the curves, and the curves adjust his X, Y, and Z position, rotation, and scale for all of the bones that are in, all of the joints that are in that character, because you can't rotate a bone. Now, if we have a look at the rotation, which is what we want to do, we want to rotate him in a forward-facing direction, is that the pink one here is going to rotate him around his x-axis. And if we just come back to this view here and have a look at his axes, okay, you can see that his forward axis, his W axis, if I click on the actual character, is this blue one. So that's his forward direction that he's going to go when we press the up and down arrow keys, this way and that way. And here, if you want to rotate him so he's leaning forward, you're going to have to rotate him around this red axis, which is his x-axis. Okay, so in here, in the animator, in the curves, we're going to modify his X rotation. So if I double click on that to select him, I can actually grab the whole thing and I can move it up and down like that. And you'll see that he rotates. This is him rotating his animation. Okay, it's not rotating the game object. So they're two different things. I've got the game object here selected in the hierarchy. Now watch this axis system. This is his axis system that he has as a game object in the world. And when we translate or rotate, it works around this axis system. If I move this up and down, notice that axis system does not change. So it's not going to affect my code in any way to have him leaning forward like this when he is flying. And in fact, he's going to look a little bit more natural if he's faced that way. Now, these are simple adjustments to make on the root of our character, which is the top one. If you want to rotate his head now up, feel free to look through this list and find where his neck joint is and rotate that curve up. I don't believe that this Mecanim system, the way it is going to replace the way that Maya or Blender do animations, because it's very simplistic compared to what you can do in a 3D animation program. But if you want to make little changes like this to someone else's animations or models, then this is the way to go, and it's not going to screw up your code. And in fact, you can see now that he's rotated forward, and his z-axis is this one, so he's still going to move forward or follow in the direction of his head. All right, so enough explaining of that. Let's just run this and see what happens. Okay, so when he's in cruising mode, at the moment he's not going anywhere, he's falling. When I start going forward, okay, he's also not rotated, but if I flap, notice he leans forward, and now he looks like he's flapping forward. You might have also noticed when we ran this, if I just do that again and we move forward, you can see he's kind of bouncing up and down. And with a flight animation, I guess that's not too bad because he will do that. He does look a little bit erratic. So if you wanted to fix that up, even here in cruise mode, see he's jiggling up and down a bit, and that will be in the animation itself. So if we come back to our animation window and we go to our fly forward and have a look at the position, if you look at his Y position, which is the green, see what's happening over time. He's going up and down and up and down and up and down. Now, if you don't like that, you can actually get rid of it. And we can double click on that and then delete keys, which is going to flatten that out for us in this fly forward. And if you don't like it in the cruise, you can get rid of it in there too. So double click to select them all and then delete the key so it just flattens it. Now you should stop bobbing around. Right, so if we flap, you can now see that it's a lot better. He's still got a little bit of movement, but it's not in his up and down so much. There are other curves in there, which you can play around with to get them right. And you can also rotate his cruise forward if you wanted to have a slant on the character as he's going forward as well. But I'll leave that to you now that you know how to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to have him bank to the left and the right when he turns, because obviously a flying object, when it turns, does not turn like that. Okay, so like an aeroplane banks, it actually turns on its side, so it rotates around its z-axis while it is also moving forward. Now, I'm going to show you first the way not to do it so you can see the effect of what's going to happen if you try and do it with code. So in the drive code, adding this bit of code down here, we're saying if the rotation is greater than 0, we want to rotate around our z -5. If the rotation is less than 0, then we're going to rotate around the z by 5. So this is in one way or the other. Now the rotation value, remember, is set up here by the left and right arrow keys. So if it is 0, he's not going to rotate at all. Now, because it's going to be difficult if he's moving forward to see what's going on, I'm going to just turn off his translate functions and save that. Right, so let's run this and have a look what happens. So remember that his turning, if we can get close enough to him and select him, his turning before was rotating him around his y-axis, because rotating him around his y-axis is the only way to get him to actually turn around. Turning in the z means that he'll rotate this way, back and forward. Okay, so it's not actually going to turn his z-axis around. But because our code is trying to turn the z-axis and the y-axis together, we end up with something that goes like this. So if I hold down the key, okay, so that's moving him with the left arrow key, and then with the right arrow key he goes like that. Now have a look what happens to his z-axis, which is that blue one. See how it's not behaving the way you want it to. What you want it to do is you want him to bank but not affect this z-axis of the game object, because it's going to get him to sort of turn on his side but then go off in a really weird direction where you have no control anymore. So the way to do this, and the way that we did it before when we leaned him forward, is to make a banking animation using our curves for our character rather than mess around with his axes, because once you start to rotate multiple axes and the way that they compound on top of each other gives you unexpected results that you definitely don't want, and the math involved is quite complex, which I'm not going to go into. It gives you this really erratic looking thing. So let's go back into my code, and I'll just put these back in, and just we will work with this little bit of code in a moment, but we're not going to be using that. I'll just get rid of all of this for now. Alright, so that means we need to make him an animation where he's flying forward and leaning to the left, and flying forward and leaning to the right. And we've already got a fly forward animation here for him, so we can just duplicate that, one for left and one for right. So we'll grab our fly forward, and I'm going to go Control D, and that will duplicate it, and Control D again. Now this is going to be an exact copy of this, so it means it will be flapping and it will also be leaning forward like we changed those curves before. Now this will be fly forward left, and this will be fly forward right. And let's bring those in to our animation. There's the left and there's the right. Now we need to add them into this animation here before they will appear in this animator where you can change the curves. Now let's go to the left one and we'll go to its curves, and we want to rotate it. So let's hit on rotation. Rotate it to the left around its z-axis. Okay, so in this case it's going to rotate that way. Now this is our curve for our z, so if we double click and grab hold of it and move it up, you can see that he rotates like that. So we want him to rotate in that direction. Now when you move these curves, make sure that you always keep it, if you've grabbed it, on time 0. You don't want to move it out like this because it will interfere with the animation itself. Okay, so let's say we want him to be yeah, about there, and that's the left, and then we go to the right one and to its rotation and select all the keyframes and drag it so that it's now banking to the right like that. So that's as far as it's going to go. It won't rotate and swivel over like it would if you were doing it with the code. You'd actually have to control how far it had tipped, but doing it this way you don't have to. Right, so that's these two animations now controlled for. We need to create triggers that are going to go left or right if we use the arrow keys, or if our horizontal axis is changed. So let's add in some bools, and we'll put it in turn left, and we'll create another one for turn right. Now we'll also need one for going straight ahead so that we can go out of the banking animation back into our upright animation. So let's add another one and call it go straight. All right, so if we're flying forward and we're going to transition to turning to the left while still flying forward, this transition here is going to be turn left. The condition, so in the inspector, set the condition to turn left is true. And then we're going to have one that goes back, and we'll make a transition going back, and the one that goes back will be that go straight is true. And then we need to do the same for making transitions for flying forward to the right and also flying forward straight ahead, so coming back. So if we're going to go to the right in here, we want is turn right to be true, and then coming back it will be go straight is true. Now what you could also do is, if you're holding down one arrow key, the left arrow key, and then you switch immediately to the right arrow key, you need to transition from banking in this direction, banking that, rather than going through here. So we can create transitions that also go between these two animations. So you can go straight from left to right. So this one would be here as if right is true, turn right is true, and the one coming back will be is left. Turn left is true. All right, so that's all set up now in our Mecanim system. We need to control it with the code. So in the code, let's open that up. I've already replaced it for you. Where I had the rotation code before that I'd commented out, I'm replacing it with this code here. And we're going to say that if the rotation, okay, that's being set, remember, by the horizontal axis, is not equal to 0, so that there is some rotation, then we're going to set the going straight to false. That actual Boolean value so that later we can set it back to true when we need to. We're then going to actually do our rotation on the transform of that game object so that we're still turning around. So this is the same line that we had before that we were rotating around the y-axis. And then we're going to say if rotation is less than 0, we're going to turn left. So we're going to set the Boolean for turn left to true and turn that animation on. Else, obviously rotation is going to be greater than 0. We're going to turn right. Now we know it can't be equal to 0 because this if wouldn't have fired here. Now if there is a rotation of 0, it will come down into this else statement. It will set go straight to true, and it will turn off our two Boolean values that we created before. And I call them triggers because it just makes more sense to me. So we're turning them off here even though they're not actual triggers. Right, so save that and go back to our project and run it. Now, remember these animations only happen if he's actually flapping. Now, if you watch in the animator there, you can see them firing. And they're not responding as quickly as I would like. And that's because we haven't done that exit time thing. So when we're going fly forward to fly left, we actually want these to be interrupting each other. So that means we need to click on all of these transitions and turn off this has exit time so that it will just go straight to the next animation. Now because this animator system blends animations for you anyway, what we're going to get is a really nice flow between these animations. So let's run this again. Now that I've turned those off. Okay, now we're flying, rotating that direction, and see that he actually does a kind of a slurp motion from one animation to the other. So that's those animations blending together, which means you don't have to do it with code. So that's all the better. Now, when he goes back into cruise mode, of course, he's moving down and he can move forward and still turn the same way. So what you would need to do is create this whole same sort of triangular system for cruise, which I'll let you do yourself. I won't go through the process. It's exactly the same as what I've already done. Now, let's just go back to this camera. If you want the camera to be a little bit higher or faster, you can modify these smooth camera values here. So if you want him to be up higher and be further away, you could set that to say 6, the distance, and then you can set the maximum speed as well. So if you slow that camera down to say 8, he will actually get further away before the camera can catch up to him. And then if we stop, the camera slowly elastics to him, and you can see how that camera is actually higher than him as well now. Okay, so that's working quite well, that system. And he's still going to continue to drop. Alright, so I'll end this tutorial here, and I hope that helped you understand how you would create a controller for a character such as this guy. You could also use it for an aeroplane as well, because it's got the banking kind of thing. And you can use a similar code if you have another character that's on the ground running along, for example. I mean, you might want to sort of turn around slightly to the left or the right as you're moving your character, and the control system is all going to be exactly the same. Oh, and there he goes under the water. Okay, so in the next tutorial, I will just add a little bit more to this, and I will show you how you can get your character to go where the mouse is pointing. And so we'll make him move forward continuously and just to keep following the mouse. Great. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learnt something about it, and I'll speak to you soon.